but
Hey, Mr. Lee.
he's having problems with that too, so he's on his way. So let's get started.
Well, so I didn't realize that Miss Akambi was,
Huh?
I didn't realize Miss Akambi was joining us via video. So I just printed the PowerPoint to PDF. Let me get Dennis to share that with her
Okay,
too.
okay.
No, I have it already, Henry.
Yeah, she
You
sent
have
it to me.
I
in the
got it
chat.
twice.
Oh, good.
It's in the chat as well as on my,
Do you,
my, other device, so.
Okay.
Dennis, tell him.
That's what I'm looking at right now. This is what you sent us, right?
what you got? No, that's the budget document.
What else?
Not the PowerPoint.
What else did you send?
That's the only. We can go ahead and I'll send it out after.
Okay, all right,
And if you have it, it'll just be duplicate.
okay. Mr. Sloat is on his way, so I told him we were gonna get started.
I had a phone call about 5 minutes after we hung up this morning on the very subject. I was like, well, you called at the right time.
I got ready to send you the link to some of those codes, but I changed my mind, thought you don't,
I'm satisfied.
I didn't know if that would be helpful for your people that maybe have a question, you could send them the links, but if you need it, let me know.
I think some folks, if they're entrenched in their opinion, there's nothing I say that will change their opinion. So,
Function numbers, medical spa. Interesting. Yeah, we're ready. Go ahead.
You want call store?
Good evening. I'm calling this session, this budget session on 6 April 2026 to order. Vice Mayor is online and Mr. Sloat is en route.
I can grab it from here if you're comfortable with that.
You may proceed, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the intent of tonight's presentation is, as Mr. Hamp wraps up his leave, he'll be back this week. The charter requires us to present in public a budget, a city manager's recommended budget by the first Monday in April. So that's the intent of this evening. We'll go through some details in the budget. And also, as we get towards the next steps at the end, we'll provide an opportunity next Monday for better alignment, or if there needs to be any more alignment on future years. We'll do a CIP presentation and then any alignment that's needed from this work session. So give council an opportunity and some time to digest this evening's information, and then some opportunities to ask questions of the manager if there are any next Monday. So tonight will be pretty heavy general fund focused. We will spend a little bit of time on the enterprise funds. We did have rate studies done in 2 of those funds, so we'll spend a little time there because the main thing that's driving the rates in those funds are the future projects. And then we'll work through next steps, potential work sessions, things like that. So quick general fund overview. FY27 manager's recommended budgets balances at a little over $77 million, which is about a $4.9 million increase. That's a percent change of 6.9% and an FY27 manager's recommended real estate tax rate, which is the only change to any of the tax rates, of 87 cents. And as we go through the expenditure adjustments and the expenditure changes, I'll highlight the ones that went towards that 87-cent recommendation because they're pretty specific in nature. So the largest change, which is generally the case, our organization's pretty heavily human resource heavy. So the largest change is $2,603,000 to salary. About $1 million of that is an adjustment to the salary scales. That continues along the same thought process and same line of the work we did last year to replot the salary scales. This just re-anchors it to the new living wage. Last year, the salary scale adjustment went into effect about a quarter of the way through the year, so it was in effect for about 3/4 of the year, but that left about $500,000 And then there were about $70,000 in partially funded positions, more specifically the 3 firefighters that were only funded for half year prior year. We have to fund those this year. Health insurance increases. We did plan for about a 10% increase in health insurance. And then also because the health insurance runs on a calendar year and not a fiscal year, last year's 10% increase was only for half the year. So it's $150,000 to fund the remaining increase from the prior year and about $150,000 to fund an estimated 10% increase for next year. Career development and stipend opportunities, those are where we work our officers through programs, our firefighters through programs, utility worker ones, concrete guys, signal techs through programs. To get them to work through their pay scale, to work them through the pay scales, we need to have funds there. Those funds go on top of the current year's salary, so that ends up being a recurring expense every year of about $400,000, and then new full-time positions of about $240,000. I'll go into a little bit more detail, and it may be easiest to look at the city manager's recommended budget for these on page 2. Jeremy. Thank you. So, on its face, it looks like there's 4 funded positions. A couple of those have offsetting funds from other spots, and I'll be pretty specific as we work through those. So we have the communication director, that would be fully general fund funded. Clerk of the circuit court, they have some new requirements coming down from the state on what they have to do in processing of files, that the state has funded a position for them, so that you'll see an increase on an offsetting increase on the revenue side for state funded or state shared expenses, but that position's funded by the state. There's a sheriff deputy position recommended. As we worked through the budget process, we saw an opportunity where the employee that the police department uses for processing work is leaving. That was a part-time position that we put $40,000 to $50,000 to a year. The sheriff can hire a jailer into that position and do both of those. And so what we did was we shifted the part-time work or the part-time position from the police department to Chris or Sheriff Johnson. And then we funded it at a full-time level because Sheriff Johnson feels like it needs to be at a full-time level. So that ended up being about $30,000 net. So that's not a full position. Or not a full hit, it's a full position, but it's not a full hit to the budget. It's a hit of about $30,000. And then one street maintenance position, that's highway maintenance funded. And so at the end of the day, we balance the highway maintenance funds we receive from the state to the highway maintenance funds that we're going to expend. So there's no real net outflow for that. So the $240,000 is for the clerk of the circuit court. We have to show that on both sides, revenue and expense. The communications director expense, and then the $30,000 of the sheriff's deputy is actually what goes into that 240. That's the net change to the salary line. Transfer to the bond fund for Waynesboro High School debt service, that contributes to 3 cents of the 82 to 87 adjustment. That contributes to approximately 82 to 85. $900,000. School increase according to the funding formula, that's $561,000. VDOT eligible streets increase of $280,000. Community Vitality Fund of $300,000. That's about a penny of the 82 to the 87, and an increase to transfer to social services of $120,000. So if you're trying to work your math backwards from 87 back to 82, you've got 3 cents for the high school, approximately 3 cents for the community vitality, 1 cent, $300,000 for the community vitality fund. And then in order to incorporate about an extra month and a half of the comp adjustment, because right now the salary adjustment is sitting in November. So to get 1 more month back to November, a piece of that is the other penny, and then the communications director makes up the other part of that.
Is that 3
Cameron.
cents?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Sorry, is that 230 or 240? Because it's written 230, but you verbally keep saying 240. Which one is it?
I think I said 30,000 for the sheriff's position, and that's stuck in my head. It's 240.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sorry about that.
And the 900,000 is the 3 cents for the debt services in addition to the 3 cents that we had. So that'd be 6 cents we're setting aside, or is that just?
Yes, and I have a full slide on the high school planning piece that I'll go through in just a minute. But yes, it's actually 3 cents and a little bit of change because last year when we did the adjustment to meals tax, we didn't take the full estimated approximately 500,000 in. We used about 300,000 towards recurring stuff, and then we put an additional 200 with the an additional 200,000 with the reserve. So that ended up being about 1.1 million, which is closer to like 3 2/3 of a penny. But yes, I'll go step by step through that. But yes, that's correct. That's an addition.
Cameron, what was the question? I did not hear it.
Councilman Sloat wanted to ensure that the $900,000 for the Waynesboro High School debt service was in addition to what we set aside in the previous year, and I confirmed that that was correct.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Salary scale adjustment. So I wanted to go just a little bit more in depth on this to make sure that we're all on the same page on how the salary scale adjustment works. It's effective November 1st, 2026. It's generally been our philosophy as staff and what's usually been adopted by council to give a little bit larger raise further into the year. It shows a commitment to council to that new rate of pay. It helps the employee with their VRS if we can't fund it for the full year to do it as a partial year versus doing a smaller raise earlier in the year. It moves the anchor wage. It's currently sitting at $16.21 to $17.35. And just for reference to the living wage, the city of Waynesboro, which is what we've been somewhat trying to anchor our at least a percentage of our scale to, and get some ideas of how quickly that living wage is moving, and so what the CPI changes, what the cost of living changes are actually doing to the employee. The living wage number is a good barometer of that, and it's currently at $21.17, and it moved up from 1944, I believe. So just to recap, main thing is that this is effective November 1, and it moves the anchor wage from $16.21 to $17.35. What the $1 million does is it allows us to replot everybody where they currently are, replot them in the new spot in their scale. So noteworthy revenue changes. Real estate tax revenue, we had some healthy growth in the real estate tax rate by itself that just came from picking up of new subdivisions, picking up of the first phase of the North Grumman property. We detailed those out kind of in the council retreat, and that's $900,000, and then $1.6 million in rate adjustment. The new penny is about $320,000 total. I keep using about $300,000 to estimate just because it makes the numbers round and easy to add. Sales and meals tax $572,000. Personal property, $385,000. Just as a reminder, we used the actual book from last year to estimate next year's personal property, so we feel good about that number. Interest revenue of $420,000. It seems like the Fed rate's holding, our reserves are holding, so that seems like a pretty safe bet. State shared expenses, usually that wouldn't pop quite that much, but the state gave some expenses, or gave some pretty big raises when the minimum wage changed a few years back, because they did have a decent number of those positions that they fund sitting at the minimum wage level. We're starting to see those trickle into the estimates that we use, and then also that clerk's position added in there. Business license of $250,000, and then VDOT urban and maintenance funds of $138,000. This is hard to see. I wanted to put it in here to memorialize, but there is an easier spot to see where you can zoom in on page, I think it's page 8, yeah, of your page 8 of your manager's budget. But so what this slide attempts to do is go through kind of all the supplementals that we received from departments, prioritize what we're going to fund this year. So that's going to be the 2027 column, which is here. Then everything that's eligible for fund balance is here. We have some reserves that we can use. We have some reserves for the ambulance match. We have some reserves for the fire station that we can use to pick off some of those small fire items. We have some reserves for the IT department. We have an EDA reserve. So not all of that will have to come out of prior year's fund balance. There's not enough prior year fund balance to cover that. But we have some reserves that we can go into to fund these that we're pretty comfortable using. The one thing that I will say about this column here, this is not a recommendation yet. We will bring an ordinance in June actually recommending what it is that we would spend from fund balance, but it's more showing council what is available to be spent from fund balance. There are some things in there that we can probably move to a future year, a couple things that I've already moved to a future year, but you'll get a formal recommendation on this for appropriation in June. What I would say is within a couple $100,000 on 3.2 million, that's pretty close between the reserves, the fund balance, and then the CIP that we'll be able to fund most of those items, but you might see a few of them drop off in the recommendation you all get, and a few of them, we spend the most time tightening this column up before we give the city manager's recommendation. And then we spend a good amount of time tightening it up here. But for example, I talked with Sheriff Johnson this morning on the phone about the processing position, make sure everybody was on the same page with that. And we got into a conversation about police cars or sheriff's cars that we would have gotten into either way that changed a couple of these that I haven't had time to get into the figures yet. But by the time you get an actual recommendation on this column, all those will be tightened up. This is kind of new from the previous year or prior year or 2026. We actually have gone through and tried to prioritize out, at least based on staff's thoughts, 2028, 2029, 2030, and unplanned. I think it might be worth, we didn't end up, because we have not previously put supplementals into the into the final council budget. We didn't end up putting this into the council budget last year. We had some conversations about maybe doing it and just never quite got there. It may be worth spending some time in one of the work sessions to make sure that one, that council understands what all of these are, and then two, that we have them programmed how council would want them programmed. We don't have to do that this evening, but it might be worth spending a little bit of time on at some point before we present before we actually distribute the final council adopted budget. So balancing and future planning continued, and so I did a more detailed handout with all of the assumptions on it. It's actually the very first one on the Waynesboro High School funding, and this is where it kind of answers Mr. Sloat's question down at the bottom about the 2027 $2 million. So as we work through this project, and we originally worked through a maximum price or an estimated price of about $60 million. And then the schools received, I think, about an $8 million grant. So that worked it down to approximately 52, but we still don't have a guaranteed maximum price. Or well, they may have one now. When we work this through, we don't have one. And so I used a project cost of $54 million because then things that pop up, like what Dr. Castle was talking about last week, his $2 million of capital items, we've done a reimbursement resolution, which ironically enough, we may not end up using because of the grant funds, but we've not actually written the bond for this yet. We can write the bond as broad as council wants to include any school facility, as narrow as council wants, as to only include the one parcel that sits there and anywhere in between. So in an effort to try and keep options open for you all as we work through it, I continue to use $54 million. I think that's conservative for a couple of reasons. We've funded a couple $1 million over there, but I want to make sure that we have the opportunity, if we want to use the funds that we've already sent, that we can use them as a down payment, or we can pull them back into our CIP or school CIP. You're going to get some interest. You're not going to spend all that money the first day you get the bonds. So you're going to get a little bit of interest there. And then we're starting to hear some things from the other projects that have been done previously, or projects that are starting to get a little bit older, like Cape Collins Middle School, where they have some needs. So I continue to use $54 million. Worth noting, though, too, that we've only increased the rate 6 cents of about 8 that you need. So if you decided you didn't want to do those things and you wanted to use all of the money that we've sent over as a down payment, and you wanted to estimate the interest that we're going to receive next year, you could do 2 cents or 3 cents. So you've not fully funded the project just yet anyway. So while it's still hanging out there, I've tried to give kind of worst case or most conservative estimates. So all those assumptions come up to a maximum payment of about $4.3 million. We have a couple of bonds falling off over the next 2 years. 2011 will have part of the 2027, or part of the series 2011, and 2027 will fall off about $221,000. We only have to make that payment for about 2/3 of the year. Series 2011 payoff, the remainder of that, actually it's about third of the year we have to make it. We'll see the remainder of that savings in 2028, and then Kate Collins Middle School debt falls off in 2029. So there's about $747,000 in savings, which leaves 3.5 million, which is about 12 cents of tax, or 12 cents of debt service need, and then, or a little over 11. And then at the bottom we have 3, 3, and 5. It ends up being a little bit less because we put more money with the project last year. So the goal all along in my mind was, let's make sure that we estimate conservatively and do reasonable adjustments along, because the other thing you have coming up is a real estate tax reassessment. So there's little chance that you've overshot. I don't think you get out of this with a debt payment of less than $2 million. There will be work to be done next year, but the hope is that you don't need the entire 3.5 million when it's all said and done. Hopefully the numbers come in a little bit more conservative, and we can use some of the reassessment from next year to offset some of this, but trying to give worst case scenario all the way through. I went ahead and included, with the same thought process, NCTC. Same assumptions, only difference is it's $14.5 million, but the same rate and the same number of years. Payment of about 1.1 million, and we have current debt capacity that we've been setting aside for, I think this is the third or fourth year in a row, of $520,000. So you're gonna have debt service need of about 640,000, which is about 2 pennies. We're still applying for grants on that. You have our reassessment coming up. There are a couple of opportunities that may not end up having to burden the rate itself, where you might either get the grants to offset it, or you may get some natural organic assessment growth to offset. But so I'm not to the point right now where I would recommend let's do another rate increase for this, but just want to keep council aware that there is potentially one sitting out there. The other thing I always try to get to is the year that you're borrowing. If you're borrowing in the fall, generally you pay a payment, your first payment's in the spring, and that's roughly a half of a payment. And so trying to get that reserve, if you will, to roughly half the payment is pretty good practice. When we go talk to a creditor, or not a creditor, to a rating agency, and they have to rate us if we have to go out on our own, which for a couple of these we might not fall in line with the VRA pool. They like to see that we've started to set up a pretty healthy reserve, and that your council has shown a pretty good commitment to getting these projects through. Enterprise fund rates, there's a couple of pretty acute drivers in all of the funds with increases. And then there is a driver in the stormwater utility fee, but it's not hit us just yet, so there's no rate increase recommended there. So we've got 5% in water, 5% in sewer, and then $2 per month for refuse. So I have kind of written out the cost drivers, but the next sheet is in the packet that I handed out is something that I did kind of for internal use, but as I started to look at it, I thought this is maybe helpful to kind of show the debt burden that we're trying to take on in those funds, in addition to the amortization scales where items are falling off. So we can start with water, even though it's second on your list. But the two big items there, the Shenandoah Village Drive Pump Station and the PW building. And we're thinking that the Shenandoah Drive Pump Station, there's a reimbursement resolution in for that, and we're thinking we're probably going to have to borrow in the fall. So a half a debt payment next year, and then the year after that, in 2028, that full debt payment comes online with a half a debt payment for the water funds portion of the PW building. So that's about $840,000 in debt next year. So $360 this year, $840 next year, $962 the following. The reserves in the water fund are healthy. We have been putting money aside for those projects. So as you get over to the running difference on that, part of the rub with the water fund is there's no debt reduction. We have one big loan in the water fund. We do have the VRA outstanding item that we adopted last meeting, where we're going to do a refi or a refinance basically on, that part of will hit the water fund, but it's not gonna solve all of the difference on the running on the right. A couple of things though with the water fund, we have seen really healthy growth and really healthy, just kind of organic increases in that fund as we bring new developments online. So I would be hard pressed to say we should do more than 5 or estimate more than 5 in any of these years because of the new growth, and both of those projects are estimated pretty conservatively. The Shenandoah Village Drive Booster Station, we've got a grant in for that. I think it was the BRICS grant that got pulled, that then we put in for a state grant that, for what I know, we feel okay about. We also haven't heard back. We could probably put in, and will put in, for a VDH loan, which will have a preferential interest rate and could potentially have some principal forgiveness with it as well. So while the debt schedule shows it going negative by the time we get to the end of it, it's not enough that probably won't be overcome by some of those pretty conservative estimates. And if it's not, we can have those discussions in 2 years versus right now. And the plan on all of those rate increases, the 5% rate increases, and you can kind of see that at the bottom, is to put 3% of the rate increase towards debt and 2% towards inflation. If you get a year where you don't need the 2% inflation, you could put some of that towards your debt service as well. So then the sewer, same thing. You've got the sewer plant upgrades, the PW building, and then some system upgrades that are going to start to hit us in 2030, and probably going to have to borrow for during 2030. That fund, again, I think the current increases are definitely justified and necessary. You have a really big debt reduction, though, in 2032 that actually puts that running difference in the negative. So you might get to 2032 and realize, or even 2031 and realize this is in pretty good shape. Let's just do the inflation adjustment. Also, the way that we meter, or the way that we charge sewer is we meter water. So as water continues to see pretty healthy increases and the fund seems to be in pretty good health, you'll see the same things in sewer. Both of those funds have really good fund balance. I would not go any more aggressive on the debt than what we've recommended, but I do think we need to show some good faith towards the debt so that if we do have to go out for borrowing, we don't find ourselves in a spot where you're having to do a 10 or a 15% increase in a single year. The next fund is the next item is the landfill fund. The big pressure there is mostly inflationary pressure, and then you also have your landfill capital and rolling stock. So that fund is not very big, and it's rolling stock heavy, which rolling stock appreciates, and it's human resource heavy, which human resource gets more expensive every year. And so what this kind of shows is a plan from 2026, which is prior year adopted, through 2031 of reserve funds, refuse fund contribution to the landfill, and then projected actual cash needs, and then do we have a surplus or a deficit? As I programmed this out, this year most of that increase was needed for the rolling stock and for the human resource adjustments for the salary replottings from last year and this year. So I didn't count anything towards the landfill funding. But I have $2 towards 2028 and $2 towards 2029, and that actually gets you to the negative 23,684 in front of, on the bottom corner there is actually, that's a positive. That means we got to the point where we have a projected actual cash need that's greater than, reserve funds plus refuse fund contributions that are greater than what you might need. So the goal I had there, if you do all of the landfill contributions from us to Augusta County Service Authority out on an average, it's about $860,000. So the goal there was to get the contribution per year every year to about $800,000. And as we continue to see them have to build new scales, do projects, things like that, I think it's a safe bet that you will need that $800,000. For a long time, we benefited from not having to build a new cell for a very long time, and now you're coming to a point where you're going to have to build a couple in kind of quick succession. And then it's kind of like those other funds where the increase on the front end is modest, continue to plan the increase throughout the next couple of years, And if you find yourself in a spot where you don't have to do one of these increases, that's great. Or if you find yourself in a spot where the inflationary pressure hits you hard again, or you have to start replacing. Right now, we replace about a truck by the time you do a knuckle boom or one of the trucks. We replace about a truck a year. If you get to a spot where you've got so much growth that you have to add another route and you need another truck, and we have to replace a truck and a half a year, you could use the increase for that. So again, I think that the increase this year is certainly necessary, and we'll continue to monitor the increases over the next couple of years to see if we continue to need them. My hunch is that building landfills is not going to get any cheaper over the next couple of years, and getting the trash there is not going to get any cheaper, but if it does, we'll dial back the rate increases as we get further out. Stormwater fund, and Todd, I might get you to help me on this one a little bit. Do we have the new we have the new permit but not the requirements, or we don't even have the new permit yet for the stormwater fund?
Well, we have the permit, but we don't have the exact requirements, and we haven't done the plans for the quality.
Yes. And so,
That's the most expensive part.
right. And so as they start to get action plans for how they being Public Works and the stormwater crews, start to get plans for how they'll meet quality requirements, it'll be a whole lot more clear what projects we have to do and how much those projects cost, and we'll be able to actually put a capital plan together that gets funded probably by a rate study. But since we don't have any of that this year, that fund's in pretty good shape. I think there's some money in there. I don't think, I know. There's some money in the fund to go after a SLAF, a state fund that's split 50-50 in the fund balance of that fund. So you may end up seeing a project there because you have money in your net position or in your fund balance to fund it. But I don't see the pressure in that fund to do a rate increase this year, and we did one last year. So that seems to have kind of stabilized that fund.
Has the quality requirements changed? That we might see something surprise us?
They haven't increased them, but we can expect to pay probably about what we've been paying, which I can't tell you what that is, but we spend millions of dollars. We've been lucky with grants. Build a lot of them. I'm trying to think, the one at the end of Ohio, it was a multi-million-dollar project, 3-something million, but we got half of it. That was airport was $3 million. We got half, 50% grant. So we've been lucky with that.
We're expecting 3.5 million.
We're actually in good shape compared to a lot of folks around us because we got out in front of it a little bit. So
Good.
there'll be some, but it's not going to kill us. No.
And we've been, that part of what may pinch on this is, along with the other funds, the fill rate in that stormwater fund has been a little bit low in terms of positions. And so we've been able to kind of sock money away into that position because of sock money away into net positions because of unfilled positions. If that starts to go away, you may end up with that same pressure that you're probably going to start to feel in your general fund and your other funds, where we really start to have to think through, do we want to budget for SLAF grant match of $200,000 a year or $400,000 a year, so that way when that year 3 comes and you need 1.2 or $600,000 to match that grant, we have the funds there. I don't think it's come through in terms of the fill rate and things like that quite quickly enough to impact this year. I don't see anything in that position that's alarming when I compare it over a couple of years from 2025, but we might get to the end of the 2026 ACFR and say, yeah, the net position went down some this year because we spent some out of fund balance. Probably need to think through, do we need a dedicated line for rolling stock or a dedicated line for SLAF grant match requirements? But I'm not to a point that I would recommend to Mr. Hamp to recommend to you all to do that, and he's not to a point that he would recommend that this year either. More FYI on the horizon. So that's kind of the end of the numbers piece. Though a couple of things to point out on the next steps. So our plan is to wrap up work through the CIP and to do a CIP presentation at the regular meeting next Monday. And also at the regular meeting, give an opportunity for the manager to talk a little bit about the city manager's budget, as well as council to express any alignment concerns or issues. Our hope would be then shortly after that meeting to go ahead and advertise rates and advertise budget amounts. Generally, and I need to work through this with Lit and Sipe, usually the thought process has been you can go down, but you can't go up. So I'll confirm that with them before we see you all on Monday, if we have to have an exact rate, or if we can say, let's advertise at 87, and do we want to continue to work on it? Or are there items that you all aren't seeing in here that you really want to see that we need to advertise higher and continue to work on them? Our plan would be, if it's needed, April 20th, which is the Monday after that, to do another budget work session. I'd recommend focusing on current year alignment and that if we're not there yet. If we are there with current year alignment, I would say that one may not be needed. April 27th, that's a regular meeting. At a minimum, I would do the ordinance introduction, and if we've gotten to a point where we were able to advertise the public hearings in time, go ahead and do the public hearings that evening as well. But I want to confirm, like I said, with Litton Sype, that we've got some flexibility in the rate if we go ahead and advertise the public hearing, and see if we can just advertise it as a rate not to exceed, something along those lines. May 4th, I have a budget work session where we had kind of planned through any alignment-based issues that we hear back on the public hearing, and then future years, that kind of far right piece of that supplemental chart that we were looking through earlier. May 11th would be adopt all necessary ordinances, and then June 2028 would be a fund balance appropriation. That would be the CIP, which we'll present on Monday, and then July 2026 would be that second column CIP that we pointed out, the small cap. We've gotten in the habit where we've done that in June if we can get the work done quickly enough, and just dated the ordinance date for July 1. Just to take some pressure off. It's hard enough at times for a lot of this stuff, and that is equipment and things like that need to be ordered, and it can be hard enough at times for the guys and gals that do the purchasing and that to get it done in 12 months. So to get it done in 11 or 10, which is how long it ends up taking us to adopt the ordinance, can be even more difficult. So we've tried to pull that back. So I may do that again this year if we can get if everything's running smooth and I can get it pulled back. I will try to do both of those items in June. And I don't know why that says June 2028. That should definitely be June 2026.
I figured
We're
that
not
was a
going to
little
wait
out of
until
balance, yeah.
2028 to do a CIP. I'll update that before I send the deck out this evening.
It's really planning into the future, Ken.
We're trying. So I don't have anything else prepared. If you all have any questions about number specific things, I'd be happy to answer them now. Or if you have any general questions, I'd be happy to answer them now. Or if not, you guys can digest and we can catch up Monday. You council folks can digest, not guys.
Any questions?
Only question I have is, I would like to see of those items not recommended for funding, specifically expenditures and salaried positions, to understand the cost associated with those requests. Specifically and maybe this is in this table that I haven't flipped over to yet, but I was specifically interested in the Deputy Director of Elections, so 73,000.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I say that was not in affirmation, but that I heard. Let me look at the.
That's the only position that I sort of, I think we're fortunate to have Lisa, and I think in terms of succession planning, might behoove us to step in and consider.
She has mentioned the word retirement a few times, so if we don't.
I just feel like we're leaving up to chance.
We are. And
If we don't lean in.
In the 12-month election cycle, a year cycle, we seem to find
Exactly.
ourselves in, we don't want to get caught behind.
And what the early voting is done, and the amount of hours,
She's gonna
and
be
getting
going
to
to
have
places
somebody
it
in there to shadow and support her.
Yeah.
I think otherwise we may be just leaving up to chance with whoever we get when she's
Yeah.
ready.
Because her part-time now is not interested, she's already retired once, she's not interested in.
May
filling
retire
in.
again.
Yeah,
So that's a very similar conversation that I'll share with Ms. Jefferson. With one of her electoral board members came with her to her meeting this year, somewhat because they're supposed to have a pretty thorough understanding of how her budget works and somewhat of the same concern. And what I shared with Lisa is we have programs and ability between vacancy savings and other departments and the city manager's contingency, where if she wants to have overlap. So you can never force someone to give you overlap. She could walk in tomorrow and say, tomorrow's my last day and I'll get my 3-month retirement check when it comes. Most folks give you at least 3 months because that's how long it takes for that first VRS check to hit. Some folks give you a lot longer. And so the conversation that I had with Lisa is usually we try to keep the position thought and the that sometimes they run parallel, but we try to keep them separate with the thought process being if you need overlap, you need overlap to train for institutional knowledge. If you need more hands, you need more hands.
Right.
And so regardless of what council decides, whether to pull a position back into the current year or push it out even further than what we have it programmed, we would put her in the same program if both the electoral board, who has the authority over hiring, and Lisa wants to do that. If she came to us and said we wanted to do a 6-month overlap and I want to go ahead and start recruiting tomorrow, we would say, go ahead and start recruiting tomorrow. The only thing we really need from you to make sure it's actually a one-time cost is for retirement paperwork. But you can put whatever date on it within reason. It's not going to be 3 years, but you can put, within 6-9 months. So if they look at it and they say, we're going to need 3 months recruit and we want 6 months of overlap, we're going to be pretty helpful as admin in that process, knowing how much institutional knowledge that she has. And I can go through probably 3 to 5 examples of varying from 1 month of overlap, from 1 week of overlap to 6 months of overlap over the last, since I've been in this position, that we've helped a department make sure they got every piece of institutional knowledge that the department wanted to give, or that the department wanted, and that the person leaving the position wanted to give out of that person before they left. So I assured her, regardless of what happens with this spot, assuming your electoral board wants this type of, assuming your electoral board wants overlap, assuming you want to give overlap, we'll help you effectuate that transition as seamless as possible, regardless of whether you need an assistant. Let's just make sure we're talking about assistant is actually needing it, because you could hire the assistant and they could be a great assistant, and then you could find yourself in a spot when she does want to retire that the electoral board says, or Lisa says, that's not the guy or the gal. And we don't want to hamstring them into having to move up if they can't. And we also don't want to, maybe you've got a great candidate that doesn't ever want to be the person, but wants to be a really good assistant, that you don't want to pass them over just because they don't want to move up. So just a.
That'll for clarity.
Any other questions?
And if you have others you want more detail on or blown out detail, I can give you something closer to what I gave you at council retreat with the detail on it. I just truncate these because you'll end up with 100 little things on it if I don't do some of the detail combining.
Yeah, I got you.
Vice Mayor Conley, do you have any questions?
I do not, Mayor Lee. Hello, everyone. Good to see you. I can't see you.
All right, thank you, Cameron. If there's no other questions, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll second.
Thank you. We are adjourned.
Thank you.